Hi everybody, my name is Bill Leahy. I work for the Harpoon Brewery in Boston, Massachusetts. We're here today to introduce you to the latest edition in the Harpoon 100 Barrel Series, Island Creek Oyster Stout. Harpoon and Island Creek have been friends for many, many years. We started doing a couple of different events together, beer and oyster pairings, chef special events here at the brewery, the Duxbury Oyster Festival to benefit the Island Creek Oyster Foundation down in Duxbury Bay. And one day we were all in the tour room right here having some beers as we typically do. And Todd Charbonneau, our head brewer, was walking by and he kind of said, "Oh, I was just thinking about you guys. I was just reading this thing about this style of beer called Oyster Stout, and it was very popular in 19th century Great Britain." And talked a little bit about it, and then he kind of said, "All right, see you later." And everyone kind of looked at each other, and the light bulbs went off. And so that kind of was the beginning of getting the ball rolling on this particular project of us working together. The history of oyster stouts, as we would find out in our research, meant a lot of different things. Stout and oysters pair really well together due to the briny salinity of oysters and the real minerally flavors of roasted malted barley. The pairing was first popularized in 19th century Great Britain because stout was the preferred beverage of the working man and oysters were abundant and inexpensive and a cheap bar snack. So that led us to kind of get the ball rolling on what we had to work with. But unlike a lot of other beer styles that are very popular and there's a lot of different things to choose from, the oyster stout style presented a lot of challenges in that there's no real boilerplate recipe that you could do or use to kind of go from. So we had to do a lot of trial and error. And last year's brewer, Katie Tame, did probably 6 or 7 pilot batches a year in advance before we brewed the 2010 version of the Island Creek Oyster Stout. So oysters in beer, it's something that we got kind of a lot of raised eyebrows on last year, but the good thing was if people thought it was a great idea, they'd give it a try, and even if people were like, "Oh my God, that sounds so off-putting, I'll have one just to try it." And it's great because it kind of, for us as brewers, we love drinking this type of beer. We love drinking rich stouts, and to get people to try things that they may not normally, kind of cotton to, is a pretty cool thing for us. We wound up using about 200 oysters in each batch of beer that we did. So 800 oysters all day went into the production of this beer. Luckily, the Island Creek guys were nice enough to come down and help us out with the shucking. As you can imagine, shucking 800 oysters is quite a time-consuming thing. What we wound up doing was we would shuck the oyster and put them into a bucket along with the brine. So we got the oyster body where we're getting all that protein and head retention and a little bit of that salt water that they had brought in and were holding inside the shell. Oysters in their natural environment are filtration for water. They clean the water that they live in. They filter in water, eat algae and everything like that. So it's actually really, really healthy, clean, clear seawater right from Duxbury Bay. So there's a little bit of that goes into each batch too, which really imparts into that kind of finish of that briny, oceany kind of flavor. And the good thing is when you're pairing this beer with oysters, you have your pint of beer, you have a plate of oysters, and you'll have the oyster and you get that big rush of that oceany oyster flavor, and you wash it down with a little sip of beer and you get that roasty minerality. And the good thing about doing this pairing is you get from roasted malted barley notes of that roasty mineral kind of flavors to it, and from oysters you get minerally and briny salinity. So there's kind of a middle ground where those two flavor components overlap. So you get roasty, minerally, and then the minerally and the briny finish again. And as soon as the beer finishes, because it's not a lingering finish in this particular beer, you get that kind of a following sea flavor of the oyster flavor coming back, and it combines with the beer, and you can really pull out where the two things connect and overlap. So.